How's it going, crypto community? Jade back with another Martian Report. In this one, we're going to be listening to Brad Garlinghouse speak at Fortune and talk about the current position of Ripple in the global ecosystem, how Brad feels about LIbra coin, and just how well Ripple's doing right now since the Facebook coin announcement, right? So, without taking up any more time at the beginning, let's just jump straight into this video with Brad.
The fact that you're wearing your banking tie and your banking suit, and you don't look like your cryptocurrency CEO.
I'm just gonna go back with where is your tie?
I don't. Yeah.
No, look,
I took it off because I didn't think you'd have one. I thought it was gonna be over there.
That happens to us, and kind of to answer your question, look, as Adam introduced, Ripple is a company selling software, selling technologies into banks, into financial institutions. And so we think about, we are selling into an audience that oftentimes is wearing a tie. Humorously, there are times when we show up for a meeting and, we show up in ties and they're showing up to meet with us, so they wear, casual Silicon Valley, and we just miss each other on the other side.
So obviously this has been a huge week for news, and I speak not of LIbra, although we'll get to that, but on Monday, right after the close, you did a massive deal with MoneyGram. That stock shot up 168% on the news. Ripple is private, so we don't know what happened inside your headquarters there. I assume there were some high fives. But XRP, which is the currency or the digital asset that you have this huge hoard of, just sort of barely moved.
Yep.
So what was the market saying there?
Well, look, I think, to be frank, there is a lot of hype, and to be crass, there's a lot of bullshit in the blockchain.
I begged him to be crass, by the way, in our pre-interview. Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of noise, and it's really, really, really hard, I think, for people looking at these ecosystems to understand what is real and what is noise. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, I'm sure we'll talk more about Facebook, but one of the headlines I read about that was, Facebook launches cryptocurrency.
Right.
That was on CNBC.
Right.
Facebook did not launch a cryptocurrency. Facebook wrote a white paper about their intent and their plans that maybe a year from now we'll see a cryptocurrency called LIbra. So I think it's hard for the industry to separate what is real. I think the MoneyGram deal was a very big deal for Ripple. I think it was even a bigger deal for the crypto markets overall. Mm-hmm. If we go back in time, and as we've heard from other panelists, I do think the original use case for crypto, it was Silk Road.
Right.
Then about 2 years ago, it became about speculation.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing in 2019 and what we'll see going forward is there has to be utility. Right. There has to be a problem you're solving, leveraging these technologies, or why? Why do they exist?
So in the sort of geological time scale, if you will, we have the era of scandal, then speculation, the scandal with Silk Road and Mt. Gox, and then speculative frenzy, and then winter, crypto winter. And so this next one you think is utility, but a lot of people are saying, well, what really is the utility here? Because you sort of poo-poo the idea of blockchains in general, sort of being used for food security and provenance and things like that.
I just think there's a lot of noise. Look, I think blockchains are an incredible evolution, and I think many parts of the internet, many parts of how transactions happen will change because of blockchains, period.
Right.
I think there are a lot of examples that I see people talk about where I ask myself, and I would ask people to ask themselves, why doesn't a database work better?
Right.
Why isn't a database more efficient? A blockchain is kind of an expensive database.
Right.
It's slower than many database technologies. And I think a lot of people, they use the word blockchain as, frankly, catnip for investors.
Right.
They want to, or for marketing, that they want to get, consulting revenue, so they talk about blockchain. Look, we have tried to be very, very focused on solving a specific set of problems for a specific set of customers. And that is around transaction banking and liquidity management. So that today, as you've heard, cross-border transactions, they are slow, they are expensive, they are error-prone. And the one cost that I think gets overlooked that people don't fundamentally understand is the way correspondent banking works is pre-funded capital sits in accounts around the world. And you have literally $10 trillion pre-funded into other banks, into other financial institutions in order to facilitate. It's the oil in the engine that allows correspondent banking to work, and it's sitting there. And if we can reduce the amount of oil necessary in the engine,
sure,
that's incredible efficiency for the global economy. That's good for everybody. If we can remove 10 trillion to a lower number, That's stock buybacks, that's dividends, that's working capital for lots of other purposes.
So this is key because, I mean, you really see the value in this or in many of the sort of digital assets that we talk about when we think about the sort of cryptocurrencies, but as the value is in transferring value rather than storing value, in facilitating transactions. And talk a little bit about, the speed, because XRP versus, say, the way we do this now, why is it so much faster than the normal banking transfers through SWIFT, for example?
Well,
So, real quick, before Brad hops into that, let's touch on the first, basically half of this interview. Comes out, obviously there's been some memeing on Twitter for anybody out there that's seen clips from this already about, this gentleman being like, "Hey, Brad, why are you wearing a tie? I thought you were a blockchain guy." And Brad being like, "Hey, guy, why aren't you wearing a tie?" And there's, that fun little banter back and forth. Something that we've heard before, that they point out that, most people in blockchain, they're not very professional. They don't take the space as serious. They're more Silicon Valley based people. They go around with their polo shirts or whatever. They're not really a part of the traditional, button down or button up, tie and suit crowd. So Brad's like, "Hey, well, when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? We work with banks. They usually dress up, so we're gonna dress to match." Kind of funny though, because a lot of these bankers don't expect this, that when they go into meetings together, Ripple's dressed to the T and they're dressed down a little bit. And it can be kind of funny because they just miss each other on that level, right? Now, what we got into after is talking about the fact that, blockchain is hype. Blockchain is a really hype word, and people say that blockchain is going to be used for everything and anything under the sun, right? And at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that it can be very useful for, a lot of things in regards to, any system that needs to be trust-based, right? That has to have trust involved. So contracts, anything involving money and ownership rights of things, these are systems that, the type of systems where it'll actually be useful to have blockchain incorporated. What Brad did touch on is certain systems it doesn't make sense to have blockchain involved in are systems such as, keeping tabs of where food is being stored at, or where a property is located, or, kitty, ether cats or whatever they are, crypto kitties, these kind of ridiculous things that people are trying to use blockchain for, that it's just, it's too expensive and slow of a system to allow for that. And it's not, obviously the system is too slow to be efficient and better than what in the financial industry for, moving of monies, but it is when it comes to these other things that you don't really need to have a trust network involved. It's kind of defeats. There's no point for it. There's no point, as Brad's saying, and the crypto community needs to learn to sort the fact from BS, because it's prolific. There's BS everywhere, and it's funny that Brad points this out, because this, again, is one of the reasons why I'm out here, talking about this stuff, because there's just so much BS, from inside and outside the Ripple XRP community, So I hope to be able to help you all diffuse some of that, even if it means that a lot of people are going to come at me, because, I'm not a permabull for XRP. I definitely entertain the notion of there being true threats to Ripple and its essential global financial domination, right? So, it's something to keep in mind whenever you're looking into a new cryptocurrency or anything, to ask yourself, okay, what is this being used for? What are they trying to use this decentralized, trust-based system that uses a lot of energy and is a lot slower than a database, why are they using blockchain instead of just a database? And that's actually going to be the first question I think I ask from now on whenever I do any research on blockchain or on new cryptos that I don't know about that the community recommends, because I feel like that'd be the quickest way for us to go in and be like, okay, this is what they're doing. Why did they need to use a blockchain for it though? And if we can't answer that question, that's where we're going to stop with that coin, right? We're not even we don't care how fast it is. We don't care how scalable it is. We don't care how well integrated it is, right? If you can use a database for the same thing, then there's no point behind it, is basically what Brad's saying. And we'll touch on that with a few different projects in the future maybe. But at any rate, let's hop right back in, get into the second part of this interview. Apologies for the yelling.
So let me say, I don't think there's going to be one crypto to rule them all. And I think there are cryptos. I own Bitcoin. I'm long Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is a store of value and people hold it. And so I don't think there's just going to be one use case. We think about XRP as an incredibly efficient shuttler, a bridge currency, if you will, and because it's extremely fast.
Right.
So in contrast to even Bitcoin, for example, we can do a transaction for about 6/10,000th of a cent. A Bitcoin transaction today costs about $2.30 per transaction. Now, that doesn't mean Bitcoin's going to fail or something. I think Bitcoin and XRP, I don't view them as competitive.
Right.
XRP is extremely efficient for that payments solution, that payments problem we're solving. And Bitcoin's, I think, as a store of value, digital gold, as you heard from Barry Silbert up here yesterday. You know, today gold is worth many trillions of dollars, and Bitcoin's worth something around 200 billion.
So there are two protocols, two technologies that Ripple uses. One is that sells to banks, basically Xcurrent, which was the sort of fiat currency that uses this, uses a bridge currency essentially, but uses fiat currency as the sort of bridge. The new one is XRapid, which uses XRP, and the MoneyGram deal is important because it really focuses on MoneyGram's going to use XRP. It's going to use this digital asset.
That's
pretty
exactly
exclusively.
Right.
Is that exclusive or no?
It's not an exclusive deal, certainly. I mean, look, we already work with lots of other money service providers, like none as large as MoneyGram. We are doing some tests, as Hikmet from Western Union described yesterday.
Right.
We've done some tests with them. But look, we think fundamentally the entry point for us has been, let's go sell what we call Xcurrent. And this is a point-to-point, fiat-to-fiat, Bank of Cliff to the Bank of Brad.
You do not want to invest in the Bank of Cliff.
Real-time debit and credits.
Right.
So Swift today, there's a series of hops that things go through. It is slow, it is expensive, and this is real time, but it's fiat to fiat. It is necessary for that to work to have that pre-funded capital parked in the Bank of Cliff and the Bank of Brad.
So
it turns out you're right. I don't trust the Bank of Cliff. I don't want to store money there.
Well,
and so if I can use,
you have to say that.
What
All right.
What XRapid allows is for me to shuttle value in real time from, say, British pound to Philippine peso in real time. And I don't have to pre-fund into the Philippine peso.
So getting back to where we are in this moment of time in this sort of crypto geological time scale, the LIbra deal, a lot of what we heard yesterday was that it's an inflection point.
All right, so real quick before they jump into the topic of LIbra, let's just rewind a little bit more and rehash on what Brad was just saying, right? So first of all, he's pointing out that, even though there's a lot of terrible use cases for digital assets out there, Bitcoin's use case and XRP's use case, Brad says that they're not competition because Bitcoin is a store of value. XRP is a liquidity solution, right? Now, as to how valid that point is, Brad obviously says he holds Bitcoin, and not gonna lie, that's actually one of the reasons why I bought back into Bitcoin after I scaled 100% out. The only reason I picked up any more Bitcoin is because Brad's got Bitcoin, and so I was like, well, maybe there's a plan in some way for these two ecosystems to live side by side in the future. Who knows, right? Hard to say, but choo-choos are fun, apparently, if you can hear my little cousin in the background. But, yeah, so the idea, though, is that these the system that's in place is that Ripple is working on is mainly focused on, again, facilitating cross-border payments, and that's why they just touched on Xcurrent and Xrapid. And what Brad just broke down with Xcurrent is obviously, that is only for fiat to fiat. It's not utilizing or touching XRP. It's not at all involved in XRP. It's totally distinct from it. And the only reason that it exists is because the multi-hop network enables banks to be able to essentially circumvent one another, correspondence in between, to just go straight between where it needs to come from, where it needs to go. Now, unfortunately, Brad was cut off and asked this next question about LibraCoin before he could really touch on XRapid, more than just saying that it's not an exclusive project. Anybody can become involved in it, and that they already have a single corridor open between the Philippine peso and Mexican peso. So this MoneyGram opportunity is pretty big. It's going to represent a lot of incoming liquidity whenever this actually becomes effective, right?
This was a sort of when you look at the players involved in it, it seemed to legitimize this idea, this sort of very big idea that's been around for a while. Your MoneyGram deal, where they're focusing on using this digital asset, XRP, is another sort of legitimizing idea. So what are we at the point, because when I look at the banking clients that actually use XRP, actually that particular technology, the XRapid, they're not the household names yet.
Yeah, look, I do think the Facebook announcement, a whole bunch of examples, you're at a nascent stage of this industry, and you have, as we described earlier, you've gone from kind of, illicit use cases to speculation to utility. The XRapid product we've now had in market for about 8 months.
Right.
We've announced, somewhere between 10 and 15 production customers taking advantage of that product. For a Silicon Valley startup to be able to go from, a launch of a new product to 10 to 15 customers, actually, I'm pretty thrilled. But I think for a lot of banks that have a lot of liquidity parked around the world, they're evaluating, okay, what does that mean? I was talking to the CEO of one of the largest banks in Canada, and they were exiting their correspondent relationship in Brazil. Mm-hmm. It's expensive for them to hold Brazilian reals, and they're like, look, we don't have enough demand, so now we're going to use a correspondent bank. Now, if they could use XRapid into Brazil, they don't have to have the pre-funded money, they don't have the expense, and they can still solve their customer's problem that need to do business in Brazil. So I think these are all examples of, it is a journey. I think that it is nascent. I will also say that I'm going to send a case of champagne to David Marcus, the guy who runs the LIbra. The reason is this week will probably be the best week of signed contracts at Ripple ever.
Right. Wow.
It has been a massive call to action because, again, Facebook kind of came out and said, we don't need Western Union anymore.
Right.
Well, if you're a bank, if you're Western Union, you kind of, that's interesting. And I think the banks realize that if Facebook is going to be a competitor in this space, they can't depend upon a technology like Swift to compete in the marketplace.
So I want to go to questions
And so that's why, ultimately, the announcement of LibraCoin, the announcement, not the release, as Brad made clear to be like, hey, this is some BS, here's the truth, right? To be crass, here's some bullshit, here's the truth, right? So LibraCoin, as many of you saw the little 10-second clip on YouTube or on Twitter maybe, LibraCoin's brought about this and said to the financial institutions, hey, you might want to start considering alternatives to Swift, because if not, there's this single corporate entity that has 2+ billion users just on Facebook, not even including Instagram or WhatsApp or any other affiliate of the new Libra ecosystem, including Uber and Lyft and Spotify. The list goes on, right? So because of this new large-scale ecosystem that Facebook's working on, the traditional financial systems like, oh, yeah, I guess we gotta actually start taking this serious, don't we? We gotta stop dragging our feet and it's visible, at least at Ripple, because they now are having so many people come in and be like, hey, we want to get on board. What we got to do, right? Record week. I can't wait to hear how many banks have signed up on this record week, because we had just gotten word earlier in this month that, in just a few weeks, instead of months, Ripple has managed to sign up 14 banks. Now, we were hearing that they're doing 2 to 3 banks back in May, was the last time we heard anything about how many they're signing. So I'm assuming that those 14 were signed since the beginning of June, and that news came out the second week of June, so that means they're signing probably about 7 banks a week. So how many did we sign this last week? This last 2 weeks maybe, right? That's going to be really interesting to find out. I can't wait till the actual numbers come out on that. And I can't wait to see some of the banks that we actually get announced from that. That's going to be what I'm really looking forward to hearing about, right? So let's jump in, finish up the rest of this.
Just a second, so please think of them and hold
get
up
this,
your hand
QA
and we'll get
here.
to you. But, so the banking legitimacy question. So the Basel Commission just came out with a statement a couple of months ago, in which they talked about a lot of the risk inherent in these new cryptocurrencies, and it seemed like, even though it was a milestone that they talked about it, the message itself was pretty skeptical, it seems to me.
My reaction to a lot of those statements is, there are so many things lumped into one bucket when you talk about crypto.
Right.
Yesterday, you heard up here on stage, some advocacy for tokens, crypto that is anonymous, that focuses on being anonymous.
Right.
I don't think that's helpful to the industry.
Right.
We live in a world of governments. We live in a world of, rules and regulations, and they matter. And one of the very important bedrock regulatory frameworks around banking is KYC, know your customer.
Right.
Anonymous transactions are not going to fly.
Right.
And so when I see some, Basel Commission come out and say something broad about crypto generally, you're like, wait a minute.
Right.
Let's understand how XRP is used. Let's understand what Ripple is enabling. There are 0 transactions enabled by Ripple that aren't KYC'd.
So let's see if we have a question here. Anybody? Question? Well, so this brings up the question. Oh, do we have one? Oh yeah, right here.
Really a clarification. When you said, thank you. When you said that it was the best week for Ripple contracts ever, was that a factual statement or are you just hoping?
No, that's a factual statement.
That
We
the
will probably-
Facebook announcement
has absolutely catalyzed contract activity. So we may have been talking to a bank, a payment provider for 6 weeks, 6 months about a contract. This has been a call to action. There's no question. I was texting with our head of sales, a guy named John Mitchell. He flies around the world more than anybody I've ever met. And this is going to be a record week for Ripple.
So to my understanding, the G20, the meeting of the global heads of states, is in Osaka at the end of the month. To my understanding, the issues of digital assets are not on the agenda. What would you want them to address first if you had to do one quick topic for them?
Lack of regulatory clarity is definitely holding back the industry.
Right.
I think that I grew up in the kind of .com 1.0 era,
Right.
and the fact that the U.S. government provided some frameworks for how they were looking at the internet then
Right.
helped investment and helped clarity such that lots of companies could invest dollars there or whatever currency. I think the lack of that in the U.S., the lack of that in some markets around the world is holding things back. You don't see the U.S. leading here.
Right.
The U.K., Japan, Singapore.
Right.
These are central banks and regulatory governments they're being proactive, and they're recognizing that not all crypto is the same.
Right.
And just because some enable anonymous transactions doesn't mean we should paint them all with one broad brush.
So regulatory compliance in a regulatory ambiguous world. Okay, thank you very much, Brad Garlinghouse. Thank you. That was great.
All right, so there you have it. Without a shadow of doubt, I apologize. The dog is going absolutely nutty in the background. I've had my mic muted basically that whole time. I want to pause and talk a little bit, but she won't be quiet. So I'm going to wrap this up really quick. As Brad pointed out, this week has been a record week for them. Literally just since a few days ago when we got the announcement of LIbra. So this is really good news. It's really awesome to hear that this is really scaring banks and FOMOing them towards a group that's willing to actually, take them on board and have their best interests at mind in regard to this space. Also, the fact that Brad was pointing out that he is vocally against, privacy coins. Now, I think that this ultimately applies most to financial institutions, to corporations. Again, because Ripple is focused on the institutions and corporate adoption, not so much private adoption. So when it comes to the adoption of the masses, you and I, his statement doesn't really apply to us as much as them. So if you feel that they just want to know everything that I'm doing, it's less so about what you're doing, more so about what Amazon's doing with their money. And so that's kind of a big deal. So at any rate, I'm going to wrap this up so that y'all don't have to listen to the shrill of the pup out there going nuts. I've been Jade. You've been watching The Martian Report, and I can't wait to see all of you, my XRP Martians, in my next video on Mars.